A brother born in the day and one by the night? Today's story is for the brothers of Vlad and Konstantin. Hey, welcome, I'm LeilaFox. Today's lore story is for Vlad the Nightborn and his brother Konstantin the Dayborn. Vlad happens to be the Halloween Fragment Fusion champ for 2021. And he does have a brother in the game, Konstantin the Dayborn. Now, the two of them do have some shared abilities. When we took a look at Vlad in the game, his passive is called Notorious. He places a Revive Undeath on himself for 2 turns whenever he kills an enemy, and fully heals himself and fills turn meter by 50% for every kill. Now, this heal and filling of the champion turn meter only happens when his brother Konstantin is on the same team. And when we look at Konstantin, his passive is called Exalted. Enemies from the Undead Horde, Demon Spawn, and Night Revenant factions killed by this champion cannot be revived, and this only happens when his brother Vlad is on the same team with him. What's interesting about this story is that we have 2 brothers with a shared lore story where one is going to be in the Undead and one is going to be in the Sacred Order. So let's go check out the story for Vlad and Konstantin from the Plarium Lore Book of Champions. Many years ago did this story begin. 2 orphan sons of a proud but impoverished noble lineage were taken in by the Sacred Order to be educated and trained in the ways of Lumea. The older, Konstantin, was a righteous soul who took to the sermons of the Order with zealous passion. Yet the younger, Vlad, chafed at the countless rules and regulations. He felt his spirit chained within the monastery, and his many escapades saw the young knight expelled in disgrace when he was only 20. For years, Vlad survived as a sellsword and nourished his reputation as a consummate and ruthless warrior until, at last, he caught the eye of a wealthy patron. The aging Duke Exed was the last of his line, though his hopes of rekindling the flames of his family's glory still smoldered until his last day. For good or ill, those hopes were doomed, and the Duke sank into melancholy as time consumed its ruthless march. But he saw in Vlad a worthy servant, and when sickness threatened to take him, he summoned the young knight and bid him retrieve a relic, a sword that had been locked in the family crypt centuries ago. The Duke believed it had the power to stay the hand of death somehow. Vlad was skeptical, but agreed to honor his lord's last wish. A handful of men-at-arms on his side, Vlad ventured into the mausoleum that lay amid the harsh mountains to the north. Finding the crypt was no easy task, but the catacombs beneath were devoid of traps or other dangers at a glance. Pleased that the errand was at an end, Vlad led his men to the deepest burial vault. Yet the moment they opened the sepulchre, a blood-chilling shriek pierced the silence. Ghouls rushed the small troop on all sides and overwhelmed them with the sheer weight of numbers. Vlad fought ferociously, but the foes were too many. Battered and wounded, his sword broken, he nearly succumbed to the undead horde. Then, something had awoken in his heart and, following a primal impulse, Vlad seized the sword of Exed's from the dead fingers of its previous owner and charged the ghouls with desperate abandon. He prevailed in the end, but his wounds were fatal. However, as he lay there dying, that same impulse drove Vlad to tear out the throat of a dying squire and gorge on his blood. In that moment, primal, bestial power flowed through his veins. It healed Vlad's injuries and gave him strength, though the price was terrible indeed. Alone, he returned to the Duke's castle to find it ablaze, put to the torch by the Templars of the Sacred Order. He knew already that the Exed family had harbored a dark secret. The blood of vampires rained through their veins, and the Duke wished to embrace it to save himself from death. Now that curse resided within Vlad. Disgusted and intrigued in equal measure, he turned aside and disappeared into the shadows. Yet his reign of terror had only just begun, and many bloody deeds awaited, including many clashes with his righteous brother Konstantin. But that is a story for another night. All right, so that was the story for Vlad and Konstantin. Now, what's interesting with this, I believe because Vlad is more so the fragment fusion champ, is this story is mainly kind of about him. We do see mentions of Konstantin, we know about his twin brother, but there isn't a whole lot said. But I like how in the end, how it's mentioned, it's a story for another day. Looking at the character designs in the game, there's also some really fun things that are hidden, which I think do fit in nicely with the lore. Looking at Konstantin and his design, if we zoom in, we see that he actually has some words imprinted on his armor. He has Purgato, Eos, and Invictu. Now, trying to do some research on what these can mean, Purgatu we have meaning as purgatory, Eos for goddess of the dawn, and Invictu, there was a couple different meanings for Invictu. We had seen invincible, we had seen unconquered, but also referencing Sol Invictus, who is the sun god. So could this potentially be some links along with his brother? We have Purgatu for purgatory, possibly because his brother Vlad isn't really alive and he's not really dead. He's kind of in limbo, technically maybe in purgatory in his mind. Eos for goddess of the dawn, because Konstantin, again, we have Konstantin the Dayborn, and then Invictu, but this invincible, unconquered, and even sun god, is it kind of reminds me almost like when somebody carries around a rosary or a cross with them. When people carry these items around as possibly like a sacred relic or something as to keep them as a remembrance of what they're doing. Now, what's also interesting, again, looking at Konstantin, is he has some words inscripted on his armor as well. So what we see inscripted here in the armor is Igne Purgandum. We see Moris bis Nicentinum, and it looks like Veritas Vero. Now, again, I do not speak full Latin, so I'm probably not pronouncing these correctly. But again, trying to do a little research about what these could potentially mean, we can see cleansed by fire, death and birth again, and maybe virtuous anyway. And again, knowing the story between him and his brother, where he's in Sacred Order, and their goal in Sacred Order is they feel they're holy knights. They're meant to help cleanse the land. I guess you can kind of see how he might have this internal struggle between himself, his duty, and his brother, knowing that his brother's a vampire. And again, like even when we look at his design, he has these stakes on his hip, potentially because maybe he's trying to fight other vampires. And maybe in the end, again, you would think, again, them being brothers, maybe potentially trying to bring Vlad back from being a vampire. What did you think of the story for Vlad and Konstantin? Is it something that you would have thought for a vampire story? I do think it's interesting that they found a way to bring in two champs. We have one of the night, one of the day. We have one that is supposed to be vampire, one that is supposed to be Sacred Order, which is holy. So there's some kind of conflict. I find it very interesting that they found a way to introduce that. I would love to know what you guys think. Make sure you leave me some comments down below on what you think about this Halloween story for Vlad and Konstantin. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, check out some more videos up here in the playlist on the top right.